Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Councilman Jim Waring. Joining me on today's show is Phoenix Aviation Services Director, Chad Makovsky. Chad, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm happy to be here with you.
No, I think it's the first time on the show, so we appreciate that. Had a couple of your very able predecessors on, but this is the first time for you, so welcome. You have a huge responsibility. You run an airport. Phoenix is a little bit different. We actually own an airport, which not every big city does. So some run schools. Mercifully, we don't do that, but we do have an airport. But let's first, you're relatively new, I guess, to the director's role, but you're not new to Phoenix. So you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. So I actually grew up in north central Wisconsin. I'm not a Phoenix native, but I would tell you I feel like I'm a Phoenix native because I've lived here far longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. But grew up in a very small town. I wanted to be a pilot. Actually did my studies to be a pilot, but after that I thought, I don't know if I want to live out of a suitcase every day. And so going to college really exposed me to a lot of what aviation has to offer. And I wanted to get into the airport side of things. So I came down to Phoenix. I worked for America West Airlines for a little bit. I worked at JFK in New York City for a little bit. I went over to LA and worked over in the LA airport system for a little bit. But I really found my roots here at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. And I came here in about 2002, worked for almost 17 years here. And then I took a short stint where I went to DFW Airport to serve as their Executive Vice President of Operations. But I'm a boomerang. I missed Phoenix, and I couldn't wait to come back, and was really grateful to have the opportunity to lead this amazing airport system.
Well, we were grateful you came back. I had a good experience with you. I think you were the deputy, if memory serves, when I started, and so sorry to lose you, but we had a capable director at the time, but I was happy when he retired that you came back.
Yeah.
You run an airport. You talked about flying. That's a big part of what airports do, but they also kind of run restaurants and parking and so forth. You want to talk about your multifaceted talents running such a widespread operation?
Well, thank you for asking. I would say a lot of people think the airport director probably just spends all their day in the hallways, greeting people, shaking hands, kissing babies. That doesn't happen. Yeah. Actually, I spend a lot of my time really ensuring that we provide the resources for my capable team to do their best work. And we are the landlord of the airport, so we are charged with making sure our runways are safe, our taxiways are safe, making sure that our facilities are up and running, and that all the hundreds of companies that work at our airport can do their very best to take care of our customers every day. In fact, we have over 50,000 employees that work on our airport campus at Sky Harbor alone, and over 750 companies on the payrolls just doing various things. So it's a huge economic engine. A lot of different companies, a lot of different employees help to make the magic happen at Sky Harbor Airport.
Yeah, and with all that going on, I almost don't even know where to start next, but maybe we'll go with, how does one get a restaurant at the airport?
Yeah, so we actually go through, it's a pretty prescriptive process. So we are a grant-obligated airport with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. And what that means is, as a measure of getting federal grant and aid funding to support our runway and taxiway development, we are held to very strict responsibilities in terms of how we let out leases and contracts at the airport. And we have a really comprehensive concessions program and an airport concessions disadvantaged business enterprise program, with the idea that the very best opportunities come right in the local community. So these concessionaires will go and do outreach. They'll look at the best of Phoenix. They'll find concepts, franchises, small business partners, and they'll bring them with them to the airport. And we do typically 10-year leases with these concessionaires, and then we'll go and re-up and we'll put that back out on the market. And so small and large business owners alike have an opportunity to participate and actually do business at our airport.
And you led into one of the questions I was going to ask. You work a lot with the FAA, having worked with the FAA some myself. They are unforgiving taskmasters. So you want to talk a little bit about that? You talked about, use the word I think, prescriptive. Yeah. They have a lot of oversight over what you guys do at the airport.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a grant and aid or grant obligated airport, they govern almost everything we do, from safety, security, a lot of standards in terms of how we operate, how we're providing services to the community, how we're engaging our community, how we're working with our airline business partners. A lot of regulations, a lot of procedures involved. But we work primarily with what's called the Airports District Office within the Airports Division of the FAA. And we work with them to make sure that we're living up to all the standards that they set forth. Recognizing that Sky Harbor is not just one airport. We are a connected airport in our national airspace system, and what we do here has to align with what's going on in other parts of the country. And as a customer, that makes sense, right? Because when you have an experience at one airport, you want to have somewhat of a consistent experience at another airport when you're traveling. So we work very closely with the FAA every single day to make sure that we can deliver services.
Well, and you work with other airports, Deer Valley, what have you. You want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so we own 3 airports. The City of Phoenix owns 3 airports here in the region. Sky Harbor, of course, gets a lot of attention because of how big it is. It's the single largest economic engine in the state of Arizona. But we have 2 critical general aviation reliever airports. If it weren't for them, Sky Harbor couldn't be effective. And if you go back in history a little bit, there was a time at Sky Harbor where we had a lot of very small airplanes taking off and landing at the airport. We were able to do that, but as we continued to grow, we wanted to make sure that Sky Harbor was reserved for the highest and best uses, and we recognized that the big long runways, the terminal infrastructure, it was best that we actually use those runways for our airlines. And so what the general aviation airports allowed us to do is move some of those pilots from Sky Harbor to those other airports where they could continue to do their work, and it freed up capacity at Sky Harbor so we could continue to grow and serve the community. I'd say those 2 airports, Deer Valley and Goodyear, are just really doing amazing work now. If you think of Deer Valley Airport, for example, it's a 2-runway airport. It's one of the busiest airports in the country.
I tell people that, and they're like, really? Yes.
It is.
Up and down, up and down.
Yeah, thousands of tenant-based pilots there. But now what's really exciting is we're working with District 1 and Councilwoman O'Brien to really look at what the future for Deer Valley Airport holds, because it sits within her district. And programs like the TSMC development up there is really adding to the vibrancy of that region and that area. And so we want to make sure that that airport's prepared to handle those businesses and the needs that they might have.
And sometimes airports generate complaints. I know you're loath to hear it, but it does happen. I live right by the Scottsdale Airport, which, you know, during a PGA tournament or a Super Bowl or something, you really do see an uptick in planes. You mentioned, you know, there'll probably be an uptick with the big businesses being built over on the 17 on my border with Ann. You want to talk a little bit about like how those complaints are handled? And the FAA a few years ago made some changes that weren't well received. We took them to court, we won, the changes got reversed, but that also affected the smaller airports. Can you talk a little bit about that interaction?
Absolutely. So we are the connection between aviation and the communities we serve. And so we want to make sure that we're developing in a responsible way to minimize the noise impact to those who happen to be living around or in the neighborhood of our airport system. And so we want to be responsive and attentive to their concerns too. And so as flight patterns change, as we continue to grow, we do outreach to the community to make sure that they can understand what's happening, and they can make sure that we have resources that are available to them, that we can explain to them how the flight patterns are changing. Maybe we have a thunderstorm that blows through the valley, and that might change flight patterns, and so people want to know about that, and they can tell and they can hear something's different. So we actually have a noise office that works very closely with the community. If any community member wants to file a complaint or ask a question, we have information available on our websites. They can call us, we can respond to their calls, explain to them what's happening. But then as the FAA thinks about changing flight paths to optimize flight paths, what happened back in 2014 should never have happened. And what we learned through that process.
We proved that in court.
And we sure did. And
that was a tough, because that was expensive, but I thought well worth the fight. People don't beat the FAA. Cities don't beat the FAA, and we did.
That's absolutely true. And we stood up for the community, and we prevailed there. And so I think the FAA learned a lesson there. I think we even in aviation, at the aviation department, learned the importance of making sure we're standing up for the community when we need to responsibly grow our airport system and the aviation system. And so going forward, the FAA understands that there will be no changes unless there's exhaustive community outreach, engagement, and feedback, so we can make sure we get it right next time.
And then that also had an impact on airports like Scottsdale, because obviously the smaller planes want to steer clear of the bigger planes. So when they change those flight paths, then that changes the flight paths of the planes you're talking about at the smaller airports. Even if they're busy, they're still physically smaller. So does that ever get changed back? I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. The analogy I like to use is squeezing a balloon, right? So when you move one airspace or airway, it actually impacts another airway, and that has to move, and so the traffic has to go somewhere. And so what the FAA does is they work really closely with the communities now to make sure that as we squeeze the balloon, those effects and the knock-on effects of that are displaced in a way that minimizes the impact of the community. At the end of the day, I think most people recognize the importance of the aviation system and travel frequently, or maybe not very much, but when they do travel, they want to know that's available to them. And so we have that responsibility, making sure that whatever changes we make, we're doing so with the community in mind.
And the most safe. I mean,
absolutely.
That's the number one name of the game. I try not to think about all the things that go into getting the plane built and properly maintained and then sent up in the air, and who's sending it where, and is there going to be there to meet it when it lands? So again, if you're a frequent flyer, best not to think about it much, but But it's amazing what goes in to what you and the other airports and the FAA all do to get the planes around the country safely.
Well, and Councilman, think of what's coming next. We are literally living in the age of the Jetsons now. And so as you think about quadcopters and unmanned aerial systems, people think that that's kind of, oh, that's a long ways away. I don't think I'll see it. We're talking 5 to 7 years out. We will see our first electric aircraft moving people throughout the valley. Possibly a feeder flight, if you will, that might connect Deer Valley.
Drones are
Airport
already
to Sky
enough of an
Harbor.
issue. You had to block those out around the airport, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you have to look at it from a defensive perspective. How do we make sure we're protecting manned civil airspace? But then there's also this opportunity that exists to potentially provide air service to communities that have never had it before, or maybe it just wasn't viable in a staffed or manned flight. We're pretty excited about what this could bring to the valley. We're going to obviously make sure that we do a lot of community outreach to make sure that we get it right. But that's coming. The day where you will be flying potentially maybe on a 100-mile trip on an unmanned aircraft with electrically powered, that's going to be happening sooner rather than later.
It's like something out of Total Recall or Minority Report. If you're familiar with those movies,
Absolutely.
That seemed like science fiction stuff from well into the future. It's almost the here and now.
Absolutely. It's happening today, so get ready.
Yeah. Now, you're not supposed to lead with statistics. Winston Churchill said something about that, but now that we're halfway into the show, how big is Sky Harbor in terms of both volume, the number of flights? Obviously, we know about the impact on the community, but it's a crazy number of people who come here through Sky Harbor, a lot of them visiting Arizona for the first time. You guys are the entryway, the port of entry to come to Arizona, and kind of what's Arizona going to be like? So you want to talk a little bit about not only that responsibility, but how many people are we talking about? How many flights are we talking about? And how does that compare with the rest of the country?
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, it's something I love talking about. So Sky Harbor Airport, we serve not only Phoenix, we serve the entire state of Arizona in our tourism, trade, and travel economies. Our airport, in terms of takeoffs and landings, we are typically the busiest 3-runway airport in the country every single year. So think about that small footprint we have, about 3,400 acres at Sky Harbor.
And that doesn't make us the biggest airport because there are bigger airports with
Absolutely.
more runways, but for 3-runway, I mean, that's quite a feat.
I'd love to give you an example. The airport I came from, DFW Airport, has 7 runways compared to our 3. They have 18,000 acres compared to our 3,400 acres. You could almost put 5 Sky Harbor airports inside of DFW Airport. And yet we're running 2/3 of the passenger traffic that DFW is. And so it really shows you how efficient we need to be.
Your runways are way busier.
Absolutely, we're very busy.
But that means your terminals are way busier, your restaurants are way busier. I mean, it's inescapable.
I think our community members probably see that when they travel. They see how busy it was. And Terminal 4 is a great example. So we handle, at Sky Harbor, about 44 million people a year. That was last year's statistics. 44 million travelers came through our airport.
Where does that place us?
That places us in this last year, we're probably at 11 or 12.
Yeah, we dropped out of the top
nation.
10, so I thought it was going to be 12. So.
But I tell you what, based on what I'm seeing with our airline partners, it wouldn't surprise me to see, and the numbers that we're seeing this year, this first quarter of this year, busiest first quarter ever.
Well, and the Super Bowl had something to do with that too.
It did.
You'll have the Final Four next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're known to be a travel destination, a tourist destination, a sports destination, and we're seeing that in terms of the people wanting to travel to and from the airport. But 44 million passengers a year, almost 80% of those passengers fly in and out of Terminal 4 at Sky Harbor. It's our single busiest terminal. Think about when that was built. It was built in the late 1980s. The types of planes that were flying in and out of Sky Harbor at that time carried maybe 100, 110 people per plane. The same airlines are flying planes now that hold 170 to 225 people. So for every flight that comes in, we're seeing double the number of people in and out of each of those gates. And what that means is our hold rooms where people wait for their flights are busier, the hallways are busier, the TSA checkpoints are busier, the boarding gates areas are busier. So we're already thinking about nearly $500 million worth of future investments we need to make in Terminal 4 just to modernize it and so it can support continued growth of the community.
And we've signed off on a lot as a council, a lot. We vote on all that stuff. So, a few years ago, we voted for a really extensive plan that was billions of dollars. Just keeping an airport going is not cheap.
It sure isn't. And I like to say, if you don't see a crane at the airport, that's a sign that the economy is sinking. So I'm really happy to say that that's not what we're seeing in Phoenix, and that's not what we're seeing at our airport. We just activated over $1 billion worth of assets this last year. We extended our Phoenix SkyTrain to the rental car center, which is a wonderful new amenity. We built a new concourse for Southwest Airlines, our second largest airline at Phoenix. And over the next 5 years, we have another $1.7 billion in the works in terms of extending our center departure runway. We're We're going to build a hotel, hopefully, at the terminal. We're going to be building a crossover taxiway. We're going to build another new concourse at Terminal 3. We have a lot of great projects in the works.
Now, you mentioned the Sky Train, and this is my opportunity to say I sort of missed the Jackrabbit bus. I used to take. But
Now you're dating
but
yourself.
Yeah, I am dating myself. I always thought that was convenient and it worked well, but there were reasons for it to be replaced. The Sky Train was not a cheap little doodad. So, but you want to talk about like what went into the thinking with making that change?
Yeah, that was a big, bold vision that we moved forward, and it wasn't popular with everybody. Even our airlines questioned whether that was the right investment to make. But what we recognized at Sky Harbor Airport, given the small footprint, the 3,400 acre footprint that we had, is that the center roadway, that Sky Harbor Boulevard, we could not bus our way out of that. And we needed to figure out, as we continued to grow, how to reduce the traffic on that boulevard. And I bet you any community member that's been to our airport during a very busy time, maybe right before Thanksgiving or Christmas time, they have seen backups and stop and go traffic on our boulevard. Another kind of unique feature of our airport is because we have an east and a west entrance on the airport, we do see cut-through traffic because we have freeways around, so we do see people who come into our airport who really have no business at the airport, but they're just using it to get from one end to the other. And so that has all congested Sky Harbor Boulevard, and what the SkyTrain did was it gave us the opportunity to decongest the boulevard. It took those buses off of the boulevard. It freed up curb space, so we had more room for pickups and drop-offs for the community members who wanted to use it, and Uber and Lyft and all these other ground transportation providers. And we created two stations, one on the east side and one on the west side, so as we continue to grow, we can continue to divest traffic off of the boulevard and out to those outward stations. So I'm really excited. The airlines, I will tell you, who initially were a little bit concerned, they love it. They can't imagine our airport and the services we provide without it.
This is my chance to confess. I used to be a cut-through driver. My PhD program, they had classes in downtown Phoenix, so I would, drive through the airport because that was really about back in the bygone day. That was about the only route that was really available. So I know what you're saying. I know about the traffic. I know the holidays are really tough. I will commend you, though, having flown relatively recently, even though I don't fly nearly as much as I used to. I didn't feel crowded in the terminals. There were places to sit. It was wide open. The restaurants were bustling, but it wasn't impossible to get food if you wanted it either. O'Hare is a different story. So I thought, this nice wide concourses, places to walk. I thought it was fine, but it wasn't Thanksgiving either. So.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Councilman, because our team works really hard. We have a tremendous amount of ownership in providing a great customer experience for our community members and travelers alike. So sometimes we take that mission, we take it hard on ourselves, and we're not delivering that perfect service every day. But hearing stories like that always it's very rewarding for my team who works very hard to deliver great service.
And of course, if you get stuck, as a native of Illinois, I can tell you, it might have nothing to do with you. It has to do with what the weather is like 1,800 miles away. And then if you got a connecting flight, then it's just a ripple effect all across the country. And unfortunately, seems to be more of that with more extreme weather. And so, that provides backup. But having been to a lot of airports, I would say, and I'm biased, of course, but Sky Harbor is about as comfortable a place as if you have to sit down as you can find, because there are others that aren't quite as nice, particularly in my old hometown. Now, you did mention the airport, or the airlines, excuse me. Maybe talk about the relationship with the airline and the gates. How do you decide who gets what gate? How is prime real estate divvied up at the airport?
So that's an excellent question. And what we do at Sky Harbor is a bit unique. At many airports, you have long-term use and lease agreements with the airlines. And so basically you put pen to paper, do a lot of negotiations with the airlines, and then you say, all right, in exchange for your commitment to be here 10 years, I'm going to give you perhaps a share of the revenues that we get from our parking operation, or a share of revenues from our concessions, or maybe I let you have veto power in how we develop our airport. That doesn't exist at Sky Harbor, and that really is great for the community, and let me tell you why. We have 30-day use and lease agreements with our airlines, so our airlines theoretically could give us 30 days notice and vacate the airport if they want. But in exchange for that, we have complete control in terms of how we develop our airport. We have complete control over the revenues that come in to our airport. And I think it's important to share, too, that local taxpayer dollars don't, aside from the money that you spend when you use the facility, there are no local general fund taxpayer dollars that come to the airport. We are on our own profit and loss system, and so
if you don't use the airport, you're not paying for it.
That's exactly correct, Councilman. So what's really cool about that is it gives us really good autonomy to make sure that what we're doing in terms of the development of that airport and any net revenues we bring into the airport, we invest right back into that airport for the benefit of the community. And our airlines get that. And even during the pandemic, when a lot of folks thought that the airlines might give back gates or leave the airport because they just, it was a slow time in our industry, not a single airline gave a single gate back. They understand the value of what we bring.
Now you talked about the 44 million we had last year and people passing through the terminals. What was it like during COVID?
Oh, during COVID, it was scary, I'll tell you. So we went overnight, almost 95% of our traffic dropped. And again, because we're on our own profit and loss system, we had to immediately figure out how we're going to weather the storm. And we did not know, with this kind of a pandemic, we did not know how long the storm would take. So we worked very closely with our financial teams, and we did pro formas, and we did stress testing to make sure that we had scenarios, and we made sure that we were cutting back our revenues, we were deferring projects where we felt we could to weather that storm to get through the pandemic. And what I was really excited about is when I came back to Phoenix in March of 2021 is when I came back from DFW, I was really impressed with the stewardship of the team that came before me and making sure that we were ready to kind of weather this storm.
Jim Bennett was a veteren guy. He worked in a lot of airports.
He understood it, and he understood what we needed to do, and I'm so grateful for him and his leadership there. But when I came back, what was really interesting is the first vaccine came out. And shortly after that, spring break travel was happening. And so we, faster than any other airport in the country, rebounded because people just wanted to get out of their house. They wanted to travel again. And we've seen that sustained growth through today, where we're, on a typical day, Councilman, we're probably seeing 8 to 10% growth year over year. So we're really seeing a very strong first quarter here.
Yeah. Of course, then you got a lot of businesses working at the airport too, in addition to your own staff. Yeah. They were all down 95% too. So scary time doesn't even begin to cover it. But meanwhile, the FAA's got a lot of rules that you still have to abide by. So it was a sticky wicket that got navigated by your predecessor and his team. And we're really grateful for that because, again, we're the owners of the airport. So it was going to be really tough if we weren't able to navigate all that. And somehow it happened and bounced back, like you said, pretty quickly.
Yeah, it really reminds us of how resilient our industry is. And people were wondering if Zoom or other technologies might take the place of air travel. I tell you what, people have this inherent desire to connect. They want to go and travel and see things and see people. And that's really proven itself out. But I do want to give you credit, Councilman, and the members of council at the time too, because we put some difficult decisions in your lap to make in terms of how we worked with those concessionaires and the bigger ecosystem. And you all have been very supportive throughout to really help us figure out how to make sure we take care of each other to weather the storm.
Airport couldn't go under. That just wasn't an option. Yeah. So, and I don't think go under maybe isn't the right term, but couldn't be irreparably damaged or damaged going forward. Right. It has been an economic driver for the city and for the state, as you point out. It's not just a Phoenix thing, it's really everybody in Arizona's thing. And it is really, it's been an extremely valuable, I don't want to say amenity because that sounds silly, but it has been a resource that we continue to use every single day. And again, I'm very cognizant of the fact that it is people's first look into Phoenix. It was my first look into Phoenix in 1989.
Mine too.
The old Terminal 2, I have fond memories. Sorry to see it go, but the times they are changing. But when you see the terminals, it really holds up well when you compare it to a lot of what I would consider our peer airports around the country. And so that is job one. It is the entryway, and I just think it cannot be stated enough that we need to make that a point of pride, and I think that it is. There's so much that goes on there. I think people probably wonder how parking, like how does that get set up at the airport? Like who pays? Do private operators pay you to then get people to give them money to park at the airport? How does that all go?
That's an excellent question. Yeah. So, and it's different from airport to airport. So not everything is the same, but at Sky Harbor, the way—
Well, I should say that. Your answers are Phoenix specific.
That's correct.
From us owning the airport as a city to all the other stuff you're talking about, it could be completely different at Midway in Chicago or JFK or whatever.
You're absolutely correct. And with parking, for example, we own the facilities, we own the garages, we own all the parking lots on airport property. There are parking operators outside of the airport that also provide services. So you may come to a parking operator and presume that the city of Phoenix is providing that service, and that may not be the case. But when you are coming onto airport property in our East Economy or West Economy lots or in one of our terminal garages, you are actually doing business with the City of Phoenix Aviation Department. We hired a contractor to take care of those facilities for us. So they are the people that you interact with when you're paying as you exit. They're helping you find your car if you happen to forget where it is.
They're people who run parking lots for a living.
That's right. They're the professionals, and so we're going to leave that in their capable hands. But the relationship we have with them is very unique. The money that is generated in those facilities comes directly to the city of Phoenix, and then we provide that parking operator a management fee for the opportunity to operate the facilities. So that money is ours, and it goes right back again to the services, the infrastructure that we develop to support our community.
Yeah. And security at the airport. You know, obviously there have been a lot of changes in the last 22 years since 9/11. So how do you interact with security? How many office, and I don't want you to give away anything you shouldn't be giving away, so maybe I'll rephrase, but there's a pretty big police presence down there. I know the number, but if you don't feel like it's appropriate to say it, but the TSA, how do you work with those guys?
It takes a lot of coordination, and I have, again, an amazing team. On my team, it's led by our Chief Operating Officer, Sarah Demery. She works very closely with the Phoenix Police Department, so this is one of those wonderful opportunities. My aviation department does not provide police services. We actually contract that service through an interdepartmental agreement with the City of Phoenix Police. And so we have an amazing Airport Police Bureau and leadership team there that help us with doing patrols, responding to calls, working with the FBI on federal issues, working with a whole host of folks to make sure that we keep our airport
You've had
safe.
issues, abandoned cars or perceived abandoned cars, backpacks that nobody wants. I mean, you got to take all of it seriously. And
Yeah.
we get those notices when it's like, hey, there's something going on at the airport.
Councilman, I'm going to write a book when I retire. So it's amazing what happens in the day of the life of an airport. And I just couldn't be more proud of the law enforcement team that's out there. We have security officers that are out there doing civilian security and making sure that our perimeters are intact. And hey, if something does happen, we are a quick phone call away. We have our own dispatch team. We're very, very responsive and quick to address the issue. And so I couldn't say enough about all they do. And you know, everything from tactical responses, we have our own canine team there, so they're actually helping us with explosive detection and what have you, making sure that our curbs are clear, there's no suspicious activity. People forget their bags. We have to have somebody check that out to make sure that it's a secure bag and there's nothing in there that could create harm to somebody. So they do so many things that it really, really just an amazing team. I can't say enough about them.
So airport expansion, what can we look for in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. So we are, as you had mentioned earlier, prior to my getting back here from DFW, my predecessor, Jim Bennett, had moved forward nearly a $6 billion, about $5.5 billion plan over about 15 years in terms of development at the airport. Now, some of those things are real near-term opportunities, and some are further out. So when I came back, kind of with the effects of the pandemic, I felt it was important that we reset. And what we did is we put forward what we call a comprehensive asset management plan update. And when we did that, we identified $1.7 billion worth of projects coming over the next 5 years. You're going to see a new concourse at Terminal 3. You're going to see a new taxiway that's going to make taxiing to and from our runways more efficient. You're going to see a longer departure runway to support more bigger jets. You're going to see potentially even a new hotel at our airport. So a lot of great stuff coming.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, as you can see from the show, anybody who's watching, there is a lot that goes on to running an airport. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. I mean, there's other stuff I would love to ask. We are running out of time. But any final thoughts? You know, we got big events coming up. Does that put a big strain, or do you think that's manageable?
Big events, it's what my team lives for. We're always in planning mode. We're always looking forward to the next big event. Of course, as you mentioned, the NCAA Final Four, that's the next big one we're preparing for. We can't wait for it.
Yeah, fantastic, Chad. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your work. Thanks for coming back to Phoenix to serve us so well.
Thank you, Councilman.
And if you have any comments or questions, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website at Phoenix.gov/District 2. And we look forward to seeing you next time on The Issues.